My sister ripped my plane ticket at my graduation dinner and said, "Stay home, nobody wants your broke face in Paris." I picked up my coat and left. That night, Dad texted, "We've chosen to cut you out completely. Don't come back." My sister liked it. I replied, "Good, you'll understand tomorrow." By 2:10 a.m., the family chat exploded. 61 missed calls. Brooke ripped the ticket in half before I'd even finished pulling it out of the envelope, the paper tearing clean across the flight number, and dropped both pieces on the tablecloth next to my plate. "Stay home," she said, loud enough that 3 tables of relatives turned toward us at my own graduation dinner. "Nobody wants your broke face in Paris." My father, Martin Cole, didn't say anything. He didn't reach for the torn pieces, didn't tell her to stop, just kept his eyes on his plate, like the centerpiece had suddenly become very interesting. My stepmother Donna refilled her wine glass. Nobody at that table moved to pick up the 2 halves of a $400 ticket I'd bought myself, with my own money, for a trip I'd planned around my own graduation, not theirs. My coat came off the back of my chair before anyone could say anything else. Quiet, no scene, just the torn pieces left exactly where they'd landed on the tablecloth. Past the gift table, past the cake nobody had cut yet, the parking lot felt colder than it should have for early June. If you're new here, welcome to Family Secret Tales. I'm Nathan, and that torn ticket was the smallest thing that happened to me that night. By morning, my family had done something far bigger, and they had no idea I already had access to exactly the kind of records that would prove who'd actually been stealing from whom. Sophie called before I'd even started the car. She'd skipped the dinner, working a late shift at the hospital where she manages patient intake, and I hadn't planned to ruin her night by calling right away. "How'd it go?" she asked, already sounding braced for the answer. Brooke tore up my ticket, in front of everyone. A pause on the line, the kind that meant she was deciding how angry to let herself sound. She did what? Told me nobody wants my broke face in Paris, then went back to her appetizer. "And your dad just sat there." "My dad just sat there," I said. "Come home," she said. "Don't drive around stewing in it, just come home." The text came at 9:40 that night, while I was still sitting in my car, in my own driveway. Not ready to go inside yet, my father's name on the screen. "We've chosen to cut you out completely. Don't come back." No explanation. No context beyond a torn plane ticket and a comment about my face. Brooke liked the message within 30 seconds, the little heart appearing under it like a stamp of approval on a decision that had apparently already been made before I'd even left the building. Reading it twice didn't change anything, and the feeling underneath it wasn't what I expected. Relief, mostly, mixed with a calm I didn't examine too closely at the time. I want to be honest about that calm, because it probably looked strange from the outside. 4 words went back to him. "Good, you'll understand tomorrow." Adding more, explaining myself, asking what exactly I'd done to deserve a torn ticket and a disownment text on the same night. All of that crossed my mind and got dismissed almost as fast. What stopped me was remembering a conversation I'd had 2 days earlier with a colleague, one I hadn't thought much of at the time, about a flagged account that had crossed my desk that same week. Those 2 things didn't connect yet, not consciously. Some part of me already suspected they would. Mortgage underwriting is the job, has been for 6 years now. Every day, home equity lines of credit, refinances, draw requests, cross my desk. The kind of work where you learn to notice when a signature doesn't match a timeline, when a notarization claims something a calendar says couldn't have happened. Not glamorous work, useful though in ways nobody at that dinner table had ever bothered to ask about. Sophie was still up when I got home, sitting at the kitchen table with 2 mugs already poured, like she'd known I'd need one the second I walked in. "He actually sent that," she said, reading the text over my shoulder. "He actually sent that. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I said. "But something about this feels like more than a tantrum over a ticket. None of this started with a torn ticket. Favoritism in my family goes back further than that, further than I usually bother explaining to people. What I can tell you is the shape of it, not a single dramatic incident, but a long, consistent pattern that had never once reversed. Brooke's problems were problems the family solved together. My problems were problems I solved by myself, and the 2 were treated as equally natural arrangements, each of us fitting neatly into the role we'd been assigned before we were old enough to question them. A specific memory from when I was 11 sticks with me more than most. Brooke, 7 at the time, had broken a neighbor's window with a baseball, then told our father I'd done it, knowing full well I'd been at swim practice the entire afternoon. He grounded me for 2 weeks anyway, never once asking the neighbor for a timeline, never once asking me directly whether the story even made sense. "She's 7, he said, when I tried to explain. "She wouldn't lie about something like that." "I was at practice," I said. "Coach Reyes can confirm it." "I don't need to call your swim coach to know what happened in my own backyard," he said, and that was the end of the conversation. I learned something that day I never fully unlearned. Being right and being believed were two completely different things in that house, and only one of them ever seemed to matter. The pattern never really stopped, just got quieter as we got older. At my college graduation, 8 years before this one, my father skipped the ceremony entirely for a work trip he could have rescheduled, then showed up unannounced to Brooks Community College orientation 3 months later with flowers and a banner. Nobody in the family ever framed that as strange. It was just how things were. The kind of imbalance so consistent it stopped registering as imbalance at all, more like weather. The graduation dinner for my master's degree was supposed to be different. I'd booked the restaurant myself, invited the family, because Sophie thought I should try once more before deciding whether it was worth the effort. We drove there from our apartment, and I remember thinking in the parking lot that I should lower my expectations going in. "They'll be fine," Sophie said. "That's a different sentence than, 'It'll be great,'" I said. "I know," she said, "but fine is survivable." We weren't even through the appetizers before Brooke started showing everyone at the table the photos from Paris on her phone, rotating the screen so each person could see the Arc de Triomphe shot, the cafe with the red awning, the hotel balcony view. Nobody seemed to think it was strange timing to spend the first 20 minutes of a graduation dinner talking about a trip that had nothing to do with what we were there for. My father leaned over twice to look at photos he'd clearly already seen. Donna made sounds of appreciation on cue. The ticket was already in my jacket pocket when I sat down. I hadn't planned to bring it out at all. The plan had been to propose the Paris trip as a family thing, a gesture, a way to bridge whatever gap the last year had quietly opened up. Brooke pulled it out of my pocket herself when she noticed the envelope, which I hadn't thought to hide. "What's this?" she asked, already opening it. "A plane ticket," I said. "Thought we could do a family trip." "For the graduation." She looked at the destination, looked at me, and ripped it in half. The table went quiet for maybe 3 seconds, the particular quiet of a room that has heard something it isn't sure how to absorb, and then Donna asked if anyone wanted more bread, and the moment closed over itself the way those moments always did in that family. I remember looking at my father's face specifically, watching for something, acknowledgement, discomfort, anything. He was reaching for his wine glass. He didn't put it back down to address what had just happened. He took a sip and asked Donna whether she'd remembered to call the landscaper about the back fence. And that was the full extent of what my graduation dinner had been reduced to before the entrees even arrived. My Aunt Sandra, sitting 2 seats away, met my eyes for a moment and then looked very deliberately at her water glass. That was the closest anyone got to acknowledging that Brooke had just torn up a plane ticket at a restaurant table and called her older brother's face a problem. The dinner continued for another 40 minutes after that. The entrees arrived and were eaten. My father made a toast that mentioned my degree without once saying the field of study correctly, called it the finance thing 3 times, despite the actual degree certificate, sitting at home with mortgage finance and risk management printed on it in 12-point font. Nobody corrected him. Brooke ordered dessert and took a photo of it for her phone before she touched it. I drove home with the 2 halves of the ticket still in my jacket pocket, not planning to do anything with them, just not ready to throw them away yet. "You ever notice," I asked Sophie once, early in our relationship, "that nobody in my family has ever once asked me how I'm actually doing? Not really asked." "I noticed," she said. "I figured you'd bring it up when you were ready." At 2:10 a.m., the first missed call hit my screen. By 2:27, there were 61 of them. My father's name, Donna's name, 2 aunts, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, all piling in within 17 minutes, like someone had pulled a fire alarm on the whole family at once. None of them got answered. Sophie looked at the screen from across the bed. "What do you think happened?" "What I think happened," I said, "is that my father tried to pull another draw tonight. Maybe to pay the remaining contractor balance, maybe something else. Doesn't matter. The portal would have rejected it and shown him exactly why." "What would it show?" 5 words, I said. Account, frozen, pending fraud review. What I learned later confirmed exactly that. At 2:10 a.m., Martin had attempted to pull a final draw of $7,500 to cover Hector's remaining invoice. The portal rejected it instantly, displayed the freeze notice, and that was the moment 61 calls happened in 17 minutes. The compliance flag I'd filed at 10 o'clock that night had done precisely what it was designed to do, and he'd walked into it himself. She took the phone out of my hand, turned it face down on the nightstand, and said, "Sleep. Whatever's happening, it'll still be happening in the morning." 2 days before the dinner, a colleague named Priya, not the one you might remember from another story, stopped by my desk with a printout in hand. "Batch came up for routine audit this week," she said. One of the names looked familiar, Cole. Any relation? Cole isn't an unusual name, and the question didn't land with any weight at the time. Could be anybody, I told her, and went back to the file I was already working on. The thought sat in the back of my mind anyway, the way an unimportant detail sometimes does right before it turns out to matter. The file got pulled later that same afternoon, mostly out of idle curiosity, the kind you indulge between actual tasks. The address on the account stopped me cold. My mother's house, the one my father and I had inherited jointly after she died, split evenly, the way her will specifically said it should be, the one asset in my entire life I'd actually believed was protected because there was a legal document with both our names on it in black and white. A home equity line of credit, $210,000 in total available credit, opened against that property 14 months earlier. Not a single draw. 14 separate withdrawals over 14 months, the most recent one 3 weeks before my graduation dinner. $11,400, the exact figure still sitting in my notes days later. A long time passed at that desk before I opened the draw history in full. Telling myself it was a coincidence, some other Cole, some other property sharing an address format I was misreading, felt briefly possible. The parcel number against county records put an end to that. Exact match. My mother's house. My signature, supposedly, on the original authorization. That authorization never had my signature on it, not once. The first thing I did after confirming the address wasn't call HR. The first thing was close the file, get up, walk to the break room, and stand in front of the coffee machine for about 3 minutes without touching it. There's a version of this story where I called my father right then, gave him the chance to explain, maybe heard something that made the whole thing make sense. That version ended when I thought about the torn ticket, still 2 days away at the time, a dinner invitation I'd already accepted, a family that had no idea what I actually did for a living in any real functional sense. I went back to my desk and opened the file again. A call to HR the next morning, framed as a routine request, brought back my own travel logs within the hour. "What's this for?" the HR coordinator asked, more curious than suspicious. "Verifying my own location for a personal legal matter," I said. "Nothing to do with work." "Sure, no problem. You want just that week or the whole month?" "Just that week is fine," I said. "The conference dates specifically." The logs came back within the hour, 3 states away, badge swipe records placing me at the conference hotel from Sunday check-in through Friday checkout, including a session attendance confirmation signed by the host organization on Wednesday afternoon. The same Wednesday afternoon, a notary's stamp claimed I'd appeared in person to sign an authorization document at a kitchen table 600 miles from where I actually was. Calling my father directly with that information crossed my mind more than once that week, almost gave him the chance to explain himself before I went any further. What stopped me was the torn ticket still sitting in my memory from 2 nights before, and the realization that calling him first would just hand him time to build a story before I had enough to make the story impossible. Every one of the 14 draws got lined up instead against my own memory of the past 14 months. The pattern wasn't subtle once it was laid out on paper. A draw of $6,000 the week before Brooke's birthday trip to the coast. A draw of $18,000 the month. Donna redid the kitchen counters. A draw of $4,200 the same week my father bought the new riding lawnmower I'd seen in his garage at Christmas and assumed he'd saved up for. A draw of $8,700 the month. Brooke got her car repaired after the accident she'd called me about at the time, asking if I could help cover it. The same accident I'd sent $200 toward out of my own pocket because I thought she was struggling. A draw of $11,400 3 weeks before my graduation dinner. the exact figure matching, almost to the dollar, what a round-trip business class ticket to Paris would cost for a family of 3. The total across all 14 draws came to $209,000, on a line of credit against a house half mine. Against a mortgage my mother had paid down for 22 years before she died, so that whoever inherited it would inherit equity, not debt. She'd been careful about that, deliberately. The same way she'd been careful about the will's language, the even split, the specific instruction that neither heir could draw against the property without the other's written consent. My mother died careful, and was not listened to. I brought the spreadsheet home that night and showed it to Sophie. She read through it twice without saying anything, then looked up. "There's a draw here the week your mom's headstone was installed," she said. She was right. $1,900, dated within days of the cemetery's final invoice, right there in the middle column. I'd been so focused on the larger amounts I'd skimmed past it. "He billed her house to pay for her headstone," Sophie said. "Apparently," I said. "Nathan." "I know." She put the spreadsheet down on the counter and didn't say anything else for a while. She didn't need to. The number spoke for itself, the same way the rest of them did. They hadn't just stolen from me. They'd funded the exact trip I wasn't invited to, using equity drawn from a house that was half mine, then told me I was too broke to deserve to come. Priya noticed something off in my mood the next day and pulled up a chair at my desk uninvited. "You've been weird since I mentioned that coal account," she said. "Everything okay?" "It's my family's account," I said. "My name's on the original authorization. I never signed it." She sat back, the casual curiosity gone from her face entirely. "Nathan, that's not a coincidence anymore. That's a real case. I know what it is. Then why do you look like you're about to talk yourself out of doing anything about it?" I didn't have a clean answer for that one, not that day. There was a version of that week where pursuing this felt like it would make me the villain of whatever story my family told about this afterward. The brother who escalated a family dispute into a federal adjacent case over money that, on paper, still technically belonged to the household. I sat with that discomfort longer than I'm proud of before deciding the discomfort didn't actually change anything true about what the draw history showed. The discomfort also didn't change the headstone draw. That one in particular kept coming back to me those first few days. $1,900 pulled from an account opened against my dead mother's house to pay for the stone marking her grave. Some things are complicated and some things are simple, and that particular transaction didn't leave much room for interpretation, no matter how I tried to look at it charitably. "I'm not talking myself out of it," I told her. "I'm deciding how to do it properly." "Just don't let proper become an excuse to do nothing," she said, and went back to her own desk. The notary listed on the original authorization picked up on the second ring the following Tuesday, a small mobile notary business, operating mostly out of a car, according to her voicemail greeting. "I'm verifying a notarization on file for a property refinance," I said. "Can you confirm you notarized this for a Nathan Cole on the date listed?" Papers shuffled on her end. "I don't have any record of that name. Not that date. Not any date. Could it be filed under a different spelling?" "I checked twice already," she said. "Nothing." "Do you keep a log of every appointment, even ones that don't result in a completed notarization?" "I do, actually," she said. 6 years of records. Never had to use them like this before. You want me to send you a copy?" "That would help a lot," I said. "Thank you." The notarization on file was fabricated, start to finish, confirmed now by someone with no reason to lie about it either way. A year earlier, almost exactly, my father had slid a form across the dinner table during a family gathering, pen already uncapped and waiting. "Just sign here real quick," he'd said. "Annual rate lock paperwork on the mortgage. Bank needs it before some deadline." "What am I signing exactly?" "Same thing as every year," he said, already turning back to his plate. "Routine stuff. You know how the bank is." Signing it without reading closely felt harmless at the time, the kind of trust you extend a parent without thinking twice, especially when he framed it as something so routine it barely deserved a second glance. That signature never crossed my mind again until the night a draw history, 14 months deep, made it clear exactly what it had actually been used to justify. A formal internal fraud flag went through my employer's compliance system 3 days before the renovation celebration my family had already announced in the group chat, the one celebrating a new kitchen and deck that cost, according to the draw history, just over $31,000 combined. Sophie watched me file it from the kitchen doorway that evening. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now I wait 3 days and go to a party. And if your dad finds out before then?" "He won't," I said. "The preliminary freeze notice goes to the account servicer, not directly to him. He'll know something's wrong when his next draw attempt gets declined, but that's on a different schedule. You know all this because it's your job." "I know all this because it's my job," I confirmed. Nobody in my family heard a word about what I'd found. An RSVP went out to an event I hadn't technically been invited to, the invitation having gone out in a chat I'd been removed from, forwarded secondhand by a cousin who hadn't gotten the memo about the family's new boundaries yet. The cousin texted separately, "Thought you'd want to know. Are you coming?" "Yes," I wrote back. "I wouldn't miss it." I want to pause here for a second, because this is usually where people ask how I managed to stay this calm through all of it. The truth is, calm isn't the absence of anger, it's just deciding exactly when and where your anger is actually going to matter. Family Secret Tales is built on stories like that. The quiet build before the part everyone actually wants to see. Stick around, because that part's next. I told Sophie my plan 2 nights before the celebration, sitting at the same kitchen table where she'd handed me coffee the night the text came in. "You're going to bring an investigator to his party," she said, not quite a question. "I'm going to bring an investigator to the party my own family threw with money stolen from me," I said. "There's a difference. I know there's a difference. I'm just making sure you've thought through what it looks like from the outside." "I have, and you're sure you want it public, not a quiet meeting somewhere first." "If I do it quietly," I said, "he gets to control the story again, the same way he's controlled every version of every story in that family my whole life. I want it to happen in front of the people he's been performing success for." She nodded slowly, like she was weighing that against everything she knew about me. "Okay," she said, "then I'm definitely coming." Dana Pruitt picked up on the second ring when I called her directly instead of going through the usual case assignment channel. She works as a fraud compliance investigator on the bank's HELOC and equity loan portfolio. The person who gets called when a flagged account needs a human to verify findings before the case moves to legal. "This is personal," I told her. "My own family. I need someone who can attend an event under a low-key pretext, nothing that tips anyone off before I'm ready." "What kind of event?" "A renovation celebration. Funded by the account I just flagged." She was quiet for a second. "That's bold, even for a fraud case." "I want it done in front of witnesses," I said. "Not in an office. Not over the phone weeks from now. I can come as a financing compliance reviewer," she said. "We're required to verify draw history against renovation permits on any project above $25,000. The renovation qualifies. It's not a pretext, it's standard procedure. I'll need the draw history beforehand." I sent it to her that same afternoon, $11,400 highlighted in yellow on the line that mattered most to me personally, and the $1,900 headstone draw highlighted in orange below it. She called back about 40 minutes later. "The headstone one," she said. "Yeah, that's the one that's going to matter to a lot of people who read the final report," she said. "Just so you're aware." "I know," I said. "Okay, I'll be there Saturday." Sophie helped me pick out what to wear that morning, which felt absurd given what the day actually was. "You don't have to go," she said, smoothing a wrinkle out of my collar anyway. "I want to be there when it happens, not hear about it secondhand." "Okay," she said. "Then I'm coming too." The celebration was held in the backyard of the house I'd grown up in. New deck boards still smelling faintly of fresh stain, string lights already strung up for the evening, even though the sun hadn't started setting yet. A folding table loaded with food clearly catered rather than homemade. My mother's rose bushes were still along the fence line, the same ones she'd planted the summer I was 5, the only thing in the yard that hadn't changed. Someone had weeded around them recently, which I noticed before I noticed anything else. A contractor named Hector stood near the grill, explaining some detail of the kitchen renovation to a neighbor who nodded along like he understood plumbing. My father moved through the crowd with the specific pride of a man who believes he's earned every compliment he's collecting, pointing out the new quartz countertops to anyone who'd stand still long enough to listen. "You made it," Donna said when she saw me at the gate, surprised, glancing toward Brooke like she wasn't sure how to handle my presence. "Wouldn't miss it," I said. Brooke spotted me a moment later from across the yard and made her way over, arms crossed, clearly unsure what tone to take. "I didn't think you'd actually show up," she said. "Why wouldn't I?" After everything, the text, I figured you'd want nothing to do with us right now. I wanted to see the renovations, I said, which wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth either. She studied me for a second, like she was trying to read something in my face that wasn't there to find yet, then drifted back toward the dessert table without saying anything else. Dana arrived 20 minutes later, clipboard in hand, introduced herself to my father as a financing compliance reviewer from the bank, there to verify the renovation's draw history against the permit package on file. It sounded like paperwork, the kind of low-level administrative visit a man proud of his new countertops waves through without thinking twice. Martin shook her hand and told her to help herself to the food. Beautiful work, Dana said, walking the deck with him, letting him talk through every upgrade in detail before she asked anything that mattered. We're required to verify the draw authorization matches the permit records on a project this size. Can you confirm the name on the equity line that funded this? Home equity line, my father said. Easy, confident, no hesitation at all. Standard stuff. And the original authorization was signed in person? Of course, he said. Right here at this table, matter of fact. I stepped forward then, calm, my voice carrying just far enough for the small cluster of neighbors near the deck to hear. That's interesting, I said, because I was at a training conference 3 states away that week. I have the travel records if anyone wants to see them. A couple near the grill stopped their conversation mid-sentence. Hector set down the spatula he'd been holding, glancing between my father and me with the look of a man realizing he might have built something he didn't fully understand the financing of. My father's easy confidence cracked for the first time. Just slightly, a small pause before he recovered. Nathan, this isn't the time. I think it's exactly the time, I said. You used my name on a loan against a house I half own, and you used the money to fund a trip I got mocked for not affording. We were always going to tell you, he said, his voice rising now, defensive in a way I hadn't heard from him before. Once things settled, once it was paid down, you'd have known everything. 14 draws over 14 months isn't a temporary arrangement, I said. It's a pattern, and the pattern lines up exactly with every event I wasn't invited to. A neighbor I half recognized leaned toward her husband and murmured something neither of them probably meant for the yard to hear. Dana flipped to a page on her clipboard, voice staying level. Procedural. Mr. Cole, Dana said, voice flat. Procedural. The original draw authorization on file shows a notarized in-person signing that contradicts travel records your son has provided to the bank. As the financing compliance reviewer on this account, I'm required to escalate this to fraud review. The account will remain frozen until that review concludes. You can't just walk in here and accuse me at my own party, my father said, louder now, looking around for support that wasn't coming from anyone in the yard. I'm not accusing you of anything, Dana said evenly. I'm confirming what the documentation shows. Brooke had gone very still near the dessert table, her face doing the math I could see happening in real time. Wait, she said. The Paris trip, that came from this account? The draw 3 weeks before my graduation dinner matches almost exactly what your trip cost, I said. You can check the dates yourself. Brooke's composure finally cracked then, not into guilt but into something closer to defense, the reflex of someone who's never once been asked to account for anything. I didn't know where it came from, she said. Dad told me it was family money. You never ask where family money comes from, I said, when it's being spent on you. She looked at our father. He didn't look back at her. I just managed what came in, Donna said, weakly, to no one in particular. I budgeted it. That's all I ever did. For 14 months, I said, without once asking where it came from. Then I looked at Martin directly, one last time, and I said the one thing I'd been deciding how to say for the entire 11 days between the graduation dinner and this yard. You tore through $209,000 of my mother's equity and called it family, I said. Brooke tore up a $400 ticket and called me broke. You were both using the same account. Nobody at that gathering had anything left to say to that. Dana confirmed, formally, that the account would remain frozen pending full review and asked me directly whether I wanted to request sole reauthorization given the documented forgery. I said yes. She said she'd have the paperwork started within the week. Hector had already started quietly packing up his grill equipment by the time I turned back toward the yard. He didn't make eye contact with either me or my father. The neighbors who'd been standing near the deck a few minutes earlier had migrated, naturally, back toward the far end of the yard, the specific physical movement of people who've witnessed something they're not sure how to contextualize yet. My father stood near the kitchen island through the sliding glass door, visible from the yard, back turned, not facing anyone. Donna set a dish down on the counter with more force than the dish required. "Martin," she said, loud enough to carry through the glass. He didn't answer her. I didn't stay for cake. Sophie was waiting near the gate the whole time, and we walked back to the car together, without saying anything to my father, my stepmother, or my sister. "You okay?" she asked once we were both inside. "I think so," I said. "It doesn't feel the way I thought it would." "How'd you think it would feel?" "Bigger. Louder after." I shrugged. "It just feels finished." By morning, my father had texted twice. The first was 3 lines of justification I didn't finish reading. The second, an hour later, was shorter. "This has gotten out of hand. We're still your family." Neither one got a response from me. I confirmed once, through Dana's office, that the matter was formally closed on my end and that any further communication could go through them. He called twice more over the following week, both times going to voicemail. The first message was mostly silence, a sentence started and abandoned. The second, steadier, angrier. "You're really going to let strangers decide this for our family? After everything?" Listening to both once and then deleting them felt like the right pace for that week. Donna sent a single email, 3 weeks after the celebration, through her personal account rather than by phone. 4 sentences. She wanted me to know she hadn't been aware of the full scope of the account, that she'd understood the deposits as savings she wasn't supposed to ask about, that she was sorry the situation had gotten to where it did, and that she hoped I could find it in myself to allow for the possibility that some of this had been a misunderstanding. I read it carefully and didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because there wasn't anything in it that would have been made better by my reply. Some things are easier to leave where they land. The account stayed frozen for 6 weeks, while the fraud review completed. Dana called me when the formal decision came through, rather than just emailing, which I took as a sign she understood this wasn't a routine case. "It went through," she said. "The findings match everything you brought in. Fabricated notarization, unauthorized draws, all of it confirmed. What happens to the loan?" "Voided in full. The property's authorization gets restored to you as sole holder. Your father's name comes off the account and goes into civil side proceedings, separate track. And him? Referred to the state AG's office for further review," she said. "Not my lane anymore after that. But they'll have everything we found." Dana's office confirmed in writing what the draw history had already shown. The original authorization bore a fabricated notarization, and all 14 subsequent draws, $209,000 total against the line, were processed without my legitimate consent. The loan was voided in full. Sole authorization on the property was restored to me alone, my father's name removed from the account, pending a separate civil resolution between us regarding the property itself. Since my mother's will had always specified an even split, he'd quietly violated the moment he started drawing against it. A separate referral went to the state's notary licensing board once the fabricated stamp surfaced as part of the investigation, a slow administrative process that would take its own months to resolve, regardless of how my family chose to discuss it among themselves afterward. Brooke texted me once, 3 weeks after the celebration. "I didn't know," it said. "I'm sorry." I didn't answer it right away. When I did, the reply was short. "I believe you didn't ask. That's part of the problem." "What do you mean?" "You never once wondered where any of it came from," I wrote back. "Not the trip. Not the new car last year. Not any of it. Not asking isn't the same as not knowing." She didn't respond to that one. Donna never reached out at all, not once, in the months since. Word got back to me through a cousin that she'd told the rest of the extended family the whole situation was a misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion. The same phrase, almost word for word, my father had used in his second voicemail. The Notary Licensing Board's investigation concluded a few months later, the mobile notary's log corroborating exactly what she'd told me on the phone, no record of any appointment with my name on the date in question. Her license stayed clean. The fabrication, the board's findings noted, had happened entirely on the document itself, someone forging both a signature and a stamp that was never legitimately applied. That detail, more than almost anything else in the whole investigation, told me how deliberate this had actually been from the very beginning. Not a rushed mistake, a constructed one. Priya sent me a message when she saw the final case summary come through the department's shared system. "I'm glad I mentioned it," she wrote. "Must have been a hell of a few weeks. 11 days from the dinner to the celebration," I wrote back. "Then 6 weeks of formal review. Then the rest of the year sorting out the civil side. And the account? Zero. Clean. Good," she said. "Go take a day off." I didn't, but I thought about it. I used part of my own savings, $8,000, to cover the legal costs of formalizing the civil resolution on the property, splitting it cleanly the way the will had always intended, my father's share now carrying a lien, reflecting what he owed me directly for the unauthorized draws, $209,000 total, payable on a schedule his attorney negotiated down to something realistic over 5 years. He agreed to the terms without much fight, his attorney advising him the alternative would only cost more. There was one exchange, near the end of the civil process, that his attorney apparently suggested, and mine relayed to me directly. My father was willing to waive the lien in exchange for a statement from me, saying the whole matter had been a financial misunderstanding between family members. 2 sentences, his attorney said. Just sign and walk away clean. I declined, in writing, the same day. The statement they wanted would have been a lie. More than that, it would have been a statement that made my mother's house not worth what she'd left it, made her careful planning and her specific instructions worth less than a 2-sentence favor to the man who'd spent 14 months quietly drawing against her equity. Some things you can negotiate. That one I couldn't. Hector the contractor called me directly about 3 weeks after the celebration. Awkward. Clearly uncomfortable being caught in the middle of something that had nothing to do with him. "I just wanted to say I had no idea any of that was going on," he said. "I billed $31,000 for the kitchen and deck. Fair price, did the work right. Didn't know where the money was actually coming from." "I never thought you did," I said. "You're not the one I have a problem with." "Appreciate you saying that," he said. "Your dad's a good customer." Was, I guess. Hard to know what that means anymore. The balance on the HELOC, once everything settled, read 0. I didn't frame the confirmation letter or keep it anywhere visible. I set it on the kitchen counter the evening it arrived, made dinner with Sophie like it was any other Tuesday, and let it sit there unremarkable, the way a closed account should. At some point that same week, I drove past the house on my own. No particular reason, just passed it on the way back from an errand. My mother's rose bushes were still there along the fence, the same ones from the celebration, the same ones from every summer before that. The deck my father built with my money is still there too. The kitchen counters I never chose are behind windows I still technically co-own. None of that changed by the account hitting 0. What changed was smaller, more specific. My name is the only name on the authorization now. Nobody can draw against that house without my signature on a document I've actually read, on a date I was actually present. That's all I ever wanted from this property. Not revenge, not even justice in any grand sense. Just the thing my mother's will already said I was entitled to. A signature that means what it says. "That's it?" she asked, glancing at the letter while I stirred something on the stove. "That's it," I said. "Feels anticlimactic." "Good," I said. "I've had enough climax for 1 year." She came around the counter and stood next to me while the pan finished. Not saying anything else, just present, the way she'd been present every step of this, since the night a torn ticket landed on a tablecloth. I used to think being the responsible one in my family meant being the one nobody worried about, the one who could be ignored, because he'd always be fine on his own. I understand it differently now. Being responsible just meant I was the only one who'd ever actually looked closely enough to find out what fine had really cost me. There's a thing I check at work every day, across dozens of files, from families I've never met, in situations I'll never fully know the context of. Whether the signature on a document matches the timeline that document claims to exist in. Whether a stamp reflects a real event or a constructed one. Whether the gap between what a paper says and what the calendar proves is small enough to be a mistake or large enough to be a choice. That gap is where fraud lives. Not in the dramatic moments, not in the confrontations at backyard celebrations with neighbors watching, but in the quiet space between what a person said they did and what the record shows actually happened. Most people never learn to read that space. Most people don't need to. I needed to. My family made sure of that, a long time before a torn ticket landed on a tablecloth and a text message arrived at 9:40 at night. The only thing they misjudged was assuming the one skill they'd never thought to ask about was the one that wouldn't matter. If this is your first time here, that's the story of how a torn plane ticket and a disownment text led, by morning, to a fraud investigation my family never saw coming. If your own family's ever tried to convince you that you were the broke one while quietly spending your own money behind your back, I want to hear in the comments how you found out. I'll see you in the next one.